For this problem, we have a 17-mile long drive, and it's broken up into 3 parts. And we don't know the length of each part, so we would have to use variables to stand for how long each part of the trip is. So it could be tempting to use 3 different variables like this. And when you add all their lengths together, it equals the whole trip, which is 17 miles. But when we have 3 variables like this, we won't be able to solve the problem. So we want to try to write each length using just one variable. So on the previous page, 163, it talks about how long part 1 is in reference to part 2, and also how long part 3 is in reference to part 2. So it's easiest if we just use this variable. So we'll stick with just using y's here. So part 2 is of length y. So that part will stay the same. Now part 1, it says, is 1 mile longer than the second part. So it would be just as long as the second part plus 1 additional mile. And I'll go ahead and write this down here so it's a little larger. But I wanted to show how we're replacing that x variable with the y plus 1. And this z part, it relates to part 2. It says it is 1 mile longer than 4 times part 2. So instead of writing plus z, we're going to write 4 times as long as part 2. And it's 1 mile longer than that. So all that together equals the length of the whole trip, which is 17 miles. And so I just put these parentheses in here to help illustrate that this is the first part, the second part, and the third part. They're really not serving any, any function except to separate the 3 parts. So removing those, you just have this equation, and you can add the y parts together, and we get 6y. And add the numbers together, we get 1 plus 1 is 2. And then solve it down for y. You subtract 2 from both sides, and divide both sides by 6. And 15 divided by 6 comes out to 2.5. So this part here is 2.5 miles long. Part 1 is 1 more than that. So this part's 2.5. This part's 1 more than that, so it's 2.5 plus 1. And this part, the third part here, is 4 times that, which is 10 plus 1, so it comes out to 11. So those are the lengths of the 3 different parts, and they add up to 17.